Hello, my name is Michael Janko. I'm a student in Visual Effects 2 of Class 1605, and today I'll be walking you through the basic creation of and implementation of particles. Just the basics. 3ds Max is not only used for particles, it is actually the oldest modeling program and is still widely used today. These pictures were taken from a scene from a movie called White House Down. The link will be provided at the end of the presentation. Particles in 3ds Max can be switched to various ways of being viewed, mainly for animation purposes. None. Basically, you would turn your particles off and view your animations in the scene. Lines would be used to get a quick representation of where the particles are traveling and how fast. This is really good when you're manipulating the speed. Bounding boxes puts a box around each particle. This would be good to see how the final animation plays out. And geometry is used to view how the final animation will look. This is the most intensive on your computer. But there are more than these, and we'll get into that later. To simply create particles, you go to the graph editor at the top of the window and select Particle View. A new window will open, and then drag and drop a standard flow into it. Standard flow can be found here. It's the fourth option down. You now have the basic particle system. You can scrub through the timeline and see particles will just fall out of it. Now we'll add some variables. Variables would be forces and deflectors. Forces, force operators. Force operators are used to directly influence the particles in 3D space, such as gravity, push, and vortex. Gravity allows the particles to be affected by gravity in any direction. Push pushes the particles in a certain direction. And vortex spins the particles in a vortex. There's more than that, and we'll get into that later. To create a force, go to the Create tab. It's the little sun icon up here. Then click Space Warps, right over here. And in the drop-down menu, select Forces. Then select the force that you want. And then once you click the force that you want, you just drag out into the 3D space how large you want the force to be. And then later on, I'll show you particle view and how to implement that into your particle system. Next is deflectors. Deflectors are made to interact with the particles. The basic deflector is the most commonly used one. You can set it to have bounce, friction, etc. Next is S deflector, which is a spherical deflector. And then there's U deflector, universal deflector. I'll get into those more later. To create a deflector is just like creating a force. You follow the same steps, but in the drop-down window you'll click deflectors. Same thing when applying, you click the deflector that you want and then drag out how large you want the deflector to be. Okay. But let's get into it and open the scene I have already created, and you can see the particles in action. Then I'll open up a new scene and build one up. Okay, as you can see here, I have a small scene set up. I have two particle systems, a couple different deflectors, and forces going on here. So let me just play this for you. Alright, pretty cool. So what I have going on here is I have my, let me open up my particle view. So what I have here is I have this standard flow. I have it linked to the sphere, so the particles actually emit from the sphere, and I have the sphere going on a follow geometry, or find target. So what it does is it goes from, well, it goes from the sphere to this target down here, then to this target, then I have my final target as the cylinder. If I wanted, I could also key the opacity of the sphere and the cylinder to off and on and make it look like it's actually dissolving and going into forming a cylinder. So this one over here, this is just a basic standard flow also. Oops. I have it going down to the deflector. So it's bouncing off the deflector, and I have a vortex, so it's spinning and going up in this direction. As you noticed, not all of the particles went in the direction of the vortex. Some of them went down. That's because of the influence that this has. It doesn't have exact influence on it. Now I'll open up a new scene and show you some of the basics. Okay, so over here to the right, we have our Create tab, our Modify tab, Hierarchy, Motion, Display, and Utilities. I'm only going to be covering these two. This is all that covers for particles. So in your Create tab, you have Geometry, so I can create a sphere as large, small as I want. And you can see I have these parameters that I can use to manipulate the object. Then I have space warps, which these are going to be your forces, deflectors, geometry deformable, modifier based, particles and dynamics. I'm only going to be covering forces and deflectors for this one. So you go to forces, you can go to vortex, and you can create a vortex. You can mess with the timing, when it comes on, when it goes off, 20 to 100. The tapering length, the taper, this is the vortex shape. What range it has, capture and motion. All of these settings you can mess with, and it'll affect how it is, how it affects the particles. And then also you can just rotate it to where whatever direction you want the particles to go. Next is deflectors. Like I said before during the presentation, deflector. Under deflectors, deflector is the most commonly used one. You can just drag out and there you go. There's your deflector. But you need to have geometry with it. So I'm going to create a plane. And the size of the deflector does matter when it comes to interacting with the particles. So if I go up to Graph Editor's particle view, you can see that I don't have anything quite yet. Let me get, before I do that. So I have my deflector and my geometry. So when I would bring in a standard flow, just click, drag, and drop. Now I have a particle system. And I can scrub through the timeline, and particles just flow right through it. And the reason why the particles stop after a certain number of frames is because of my settings in here, my birth. Emit start is 0, emit stop is 30. The amount is 200. You mess with those settings to give yourself more particles and create, keep creating them over time. Next, if we add a collision, just drop it in there. Collision, I'm going to add my deflector. So now my deflector bounces my particles completely off. And there's different settings for the collision as well. Bounce, continue, stop, random. Continue, they just flow right through it. Stop, the deflector basically catches all the particles. And then random, they'll just travel in random directions. Some of them will pierce through. Just go in all different random directions. Is slow after collision, so the deflector can actually, the particles can still pass through them, but they'll slow down. Or they won't pass through them, they'll still bounce, but they'll slow down afterwards. It'll speed up after collision, how many times you want it to collide, and what you want it to do after it bounces. So let's give it 4 bounces, and then stop. But, as you saw, it still went straight up, so we need to add gravity into here. So, let's go to Space Warps, Forces, Gravity. And let's just add gravity. But we need to add gravity into our particle system here. So I'm going to go to Force. There it is. Drag and drop. Force, I'm going to add my gravity. So now they'll bounce, and then they'll just continue through. So let's go down to 2 times. Okay. So that's how it's affecting my entire scene. So if you want to create something like what I had before, with the follow objects,